Okay, let's continue on here. So we did this top section in the last video, and let's focus on doing the bottom section in this next video. So what I want to do here is I'm going to draw another box here to represent kind of what we're doing here. So this area with the logo and the menu is the top section, and then we're going to have a bottom section. Okay, and then basically what we're going to have is another div that kind of looks like this. That's going to be centered in between this top and this bottom section, right? And then this section is going to be broken up into a couple of different divs. So there's going to be one that kind of looks like this. Okay. There's going to be another one that's going to contain this search box for us. Okay, like so. And then lastly, we're going to have another one that kind of looks like this, essentially. All right, so this is going to be essentially our game plan, and let's go ahead and start creating it. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm just going to lay out some of this text here. I'm just going to control and double click it until I can actually get inside of it, and I'm just going to copy this entire text blurb here. And then inside of our bottom section, we're going to make a we're going to call this a div, and this is going to be a content wrapper. We're going to make it a class, and we're just going to call this content wrapper. This is just a wrapper around all our content for this bottom section. And then we're just going to have a div, and it's just going to have a class of, we'll call it tagline. I think that might be an accurate description of what this is. Okay. So what we need to do here is look at the font here. So it's the Poppins font. And then we have this freelance match is in Courgette. So we already have some classes that are set up for this. So I just forgot, is this Poppins extra bold? Sure. So what we can do here, so we have our fonts file here, and we set up a number of classes already, and we're just going to use these. So we can just put in Poppins extra bold, and that will make all this text that extra bold font. And this freelance match part here, we can just wrap in a span. So again, a span, it just kind of flows in line with the rest of the document. So it just allows us to have like a handy little wrapper here. And we can put a class on here called Courgette. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go into our section 1 here and go to the bottom, and we can start writing our classes in here. That's obviously incorrect. So 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. I had to enable an auto hotkey script that I use for copying and pasting, which is why we're having a little difficulty here, but that's all right. Okay. And then inside of this content wrapper, we have this tagline section. Okay. And the first thing that we have to do is we need to figure out the size of this text. And so it's 91.7. And so we're just going to go with 92 in this case. And I want to make sure this is at 32 because I'm taking the measurements out of the 4K design. And it's 92. So it's going to be 2.875 rem. And so we can just set the font size here to this size. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that this tagline div only goes out to be, roughly this far, maybe even a little farther. Okay, so I grabbed the text box and not the box that I drew. So I'm going to go to my, okay, so this is looking pretty good. So I want the width of this red box, and I want it to be, let's just call it 1150. That's going to be like close enough. And that by us setting the width of this tagline div, it's going to make sure that our text wraps around exactly how we want it to wrap. And this is going to be important because, for example, when we are going to do responsive stuff, we want this to be, this is not a very good example because I can't make it grow how I want it to grow, but we may have to, change the screen size, and we kind of want the text to always look the same. So that's just something that we're going to keep in mind as we're doing this. So we're going to set the width of this to be 35 rem here. And last but not least, we need to check the line height. So the way that you can do this is pressing this A icon up here. And then we get the character panel that flies out, and the line height is set via this option called leading override. Leading override is the same as setting line height in CSS. And what line height is you can think about a piece of text as consuming a certain amount of vertical space, right? And the text sits in the middle of that space, and that's line height. So the default line height with Bootstrap is 1.5, and that's a multiplier. So as an example, if you have a font at that 16 pixels, by default, the line height is going to be set to 24 pixels. So one line of text will take up 24 pixels of vertical height, and the text will be 16 pixels tall, and it's going to be centered inside of that amount of vertical space. So for this design, it's saying that our line height is 118 pixels. So what I want to do is make this, I think in this case, I might round down to 118 or, yeah, let's just use 119. That's fine. It's not going to matter all that much. Okay. And then we can translate that into a line height by using the line height parameter, and like so. And I'm going to go ahead and fire this up, and we can go take a peek at what we have here. And this is what we have. It's this white text and on the background. One thing that I want to do here is I'm going to explicitly set the text to white by using the color attribute. And I'm just going to set it to FFFF. Okay. And this is just in case, for whatever reason, if in the future I went back and I changed under body, we have our default color of the entire document set to color F. And by default, I think I kind of want this to be probably black or something along those lines. That's typically like a default color for your fonts in your document. And so just in case that ever changes, you just want to make sure that this is always going to be the right color, right? So it's just a little safer to do it this way. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we want to create this, this text search box, okay? Now, I'm not going to worry so much about like laying everything out exactly perfectly right away. So I like to just kind of get in there, get stuff done quick and dirty, and then we do another pass or two over the top of it and just refine it a little bit. So that's just typically how I work. Same kind of concept, like if I was drawing a picture or something, you start off with kind of the rough shapes, and then you go down and you refine it until you get what you want. So we're just going to create a div here, and we're going to call this class, we're going to call it search box. Okay. Now, this is where Bootstrap can be very handy to us. So if we go into our Bootstrap documents and we go down to, there's like a form or what is it called? It's called input groups is what we're looking for. Okay, so these input groups are extremely handy because you can have like a text input of some kind, and then you can have like, you can prepend something to it, or there's actually examples in here for exactly what we're looking for. Okay, this isn't floating labels. What we need is input group. Okay, so this is a better example, right? So you can have like a text box and you can put stuff in the start or the end of it. And if we keep going down farther here, there's other examples. This is exactly what we're looking for. We're essentially looking to have a button, like an input and then a button on the end of it. And so what we can do is, so the second example, we can just come down here and we can just steal this code. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Now, here are a few attributes that we haven't really covered yet. So the input is what it sounds like. It's a text input, like a line of input. And the type is text. And inputs can have all different kinds of different options, but typically, most of the time, you're just going to use text as an input. And then they have the class here. And then they have this thing called placeholder. Okay, so I'm just going to save this real quick, and then we can go look at what placeholder is. And placeholder is essentially like a word that's there, or multiple words that are there, and then when you start typing, it disappears, right? So it's like able to tell you what the field is without you having to actually have a label on top of it. Okay. And then these area labels and area description by, these are for accessibility options. So for example, for somebody using a screen reader or something along those lines, that's what these area fields are, if you ever see them. How much you care about that depends on usually how big of a project you're working on. The more enterprise type of a client you have, that's like larger, it's going to care a lot more about this. And a lot of people don't really care if you have these, but some do. I've worked on projects in like the aging, the senior care sector, and this is something that we focused a lot on. But I've also had customers who just don't care at all about whether or not these are set. So this is just one of those things you're just going to get used to as you use it, and you're going to have to kind of interface with whoever you're working with to determine whether or not, or how much you actually care about using these. So, I mean, it's good to use them. And if you just copy them out of the Bootstrap documentation, right? Like they already have these already set up on them. So it's kind of like, why not use them? So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back and reference our design here. And it says search for any service. And so that's what we're going to put in here. Search for any service. Okay. And so like the area label would be the same as a placeholder. And then the area described by attribute is referencing an ID. So the ID that we see here, button to, add-on to, and so we can change this to search button, and then we could just change the ID of this button to search button, because I think that makes a little more sense. Okay. So that's a good start. And what I see here is we have this magnifying glass inside of it. So let's go to Font Awesome. And search for a magnifying glass. In fact, the magnifying glass is like right at the top. So I'm just going to grab that real quick. and go back to my code and replace this button text with the magnifying glass like this. And if I save this, we should have a magnifying glass inside of our button right here. So what I notice first thing is this button is green. So what we should be looking at are the Bootstrap colors. So we know from looking at this button section, for example, a green button should use the success class. And this is just the process that should go through your head. Okay, I want the green color. So this button is button outline secondary. Let's change this to button or BTN success, like so. And then we can save it. And here we go. Now we have a green button. Now this green button isn't the right color of green. Now this is the beautiful thing about working with Bootstrap and Sass. We can change the color of it. Okay, so I'm going to go into my Bootstrap file here. And I'm just going to control click on this word Bootstrap. And it's going to take me inside of the Bootstrap Sass files. And then I'm going to look at variables. Same thing. I'm holding control and I'm clicking. And then it's going to take me into the variables file. Now, if we want to know what color success is, we can use Control F and search for the success variable. Okay, this is how you define variables in Sass. You put a $sign and then a word, and then we see that it's defined as the green variable by default. And this default keyword means if no other value is present, this is the value that it should be. And then we can kind of work our way backwards. Okay, so what is green? So I'm going to hold control and click green. And it's going to take me to higher part of the document here where green is specified. And our green is specified as this color. Okay, now let's say we want to change this color in our theme. This is something that I've done with other clients. So normally you have a client and they have a certain color scheme that they want, and you can just like recolor things in Bootstrap. So all the elements look the right color and you're not having to sit here and write a bunch of different styles, which takes a lot longer to recolor everything manually all the time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to close this. I'm going to create a new layer. And then I'm going to use my color picker tool. And I'm going to go over the button. And I have the color here. And then I'm just going to swap the color to figure out what it is. And you can double click to open it up here, or the color is right here as well. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Bootstrap file. And we're going to use with. And then we're going to use these braces like this, and we're going to put green. So we're overriding the green variable with this value here. And when I save this, it will recompile Bootstrap and replace this color green. And there we go. Now we have the right color button in here. And now anytime we want to use that success class on anything, it's going to use that green color. And Bootstrap has a bunch of functions and stuff already wrote in it. And so it calculates, the hover over color. Hover over is when you take your mouse and you put it over something. You're hovering over something. We'll get into more of that later, I'm sure. And you see that the color changes. So that's very, very cool. There are other places where we're going to use this. So if we look farther down in here, then we can see that, for example, we have another button that looks the same. And there's another one down here as well. So we're going to use this a couple of times in this particular design. Now, what I want to do is I want to change the text color of all these success buttons so that the text color is going to be white. Now, we could probably even go into Bootstrap and figure out how to do this, but this is actually not very difficult to do. So we're just going to write a little CSS here, and we're just going to target the button, success, like so. And then we're just going to set the color to 3 Fs, like so. And there we go. Our color is now white. Now we notice that when we hover over this, the color changes to black, and I don't like that either. So here's another CSS tip. So what we can do here is use the AND operator, okay? An AND is basically like saying I want to write a subclass that includes this class. So it's using the AND is like the same as how do I describe it? It'll make more sense when I actually write it, I think. So and hover, we want to change the hover, and we want to change the color of the hover to FFF. So this and is like saying if you're writing plain CSS, you would write button success hover, like that, I believe. So essentially that and is just pulling what you wrote before that, that's above it, and essentially it would replace it right here. So it's just a handy little way. I hope that makes sense. That's how I think about it. It's kind of like an extender of whatever the parent class is. And now when we go back here and we hover over it, okay, we have white color still. I think that looks pretty good. Obviously, this is still looking pretty scuffed. So what I want to do is this content wrapper, I only want it to be this wide. So the width should be about 1300 pixels. That's 1302 even. And I'm going to come down to section 1. And then this content wrapper, I'm going to set to be max width of this many rem. And this just means that this content wrapper can't be any wider than this maximum width. And this is going to keep it responsive. So if I come in here to my inspector and I start closing down my window like this, it's always going to have that amount of width, right? So what I'm noticing is the text isn't resizing correctly, so I also want to set this to max width of this as well. And you notice as we close down the window here, then things kind of resize. Basically, we set the max width of the size that this element can take up. So if we hover over it, the blue area is the size of this content wrapper, and that's as big as that it can get. And we're going to play more around with that later, but this is a good start. Other things that I want to change here, this text input is obviously fairly tall, so I'm just going to control click on it, and we're going to figure out how tall it really is. So its height is 94.9 pixels. Let's just call that 95. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so it's going to be 2.969 rem. So I can come in here and I'm just going to right click and go to inspect. And I'm going to look at this input group and I'm going to set the height to that amount of rems and see what it looks like. And this actually looks really good. Everything stays exactly how we want it. So I'm just going to commit this code. I'm just going to copy it out of here. And I'm going to go back to our section 1. We're going to make a new class called search box. And inside of the search box, we want to modify the input group class. And I want to set the height. Okay, got a little overlapping code there. No problem. We can clean that up real quick. Okay, one thing that I want to also change here is this button width needs to be wider. And so this button needs to be about 131 pixels. So let's go ahead and change that right away. And I'm just going to target the button inside of this input group, right? So here's our input group and here's our button. our button with the BTN class. So I can just target the BTN class. And I'd say that I want the width to be like this. And we can go back and see how that looks. And that's looking really good. Now, the last thing I want to do is probably adjust the radius of the corners on this search thing. So let's go see what they are inside of this document. So it's going to be a little difficult to tell here. So I'm just going to delete the box that's on it. And I'm just going to control click this green area. And we can see that I have absolute sizes set, and our radiuses are set to 6 pixels here. So that's fine. And what I'm going to do is come down here and I'm just going to look for 6 pixels, which is 0.4 rem. Okay, so what's important here is the button and the search box are different elements. And so this search box here, we would change the radius on just this left side, the top and bottom. And then on the button, we need to adjust it on the right side, top and bottom. Okay. So I'm going to target the actual input here. And I'm going to change the border, top left radius to this amount of rem. And I'm going to duplicate this line and change top to bottom. All right. And I'm just going to copy these to this button as well. And we're going to change left to right. Like so. And then I'm just going to click on this and just double check it. And I'm just exaggerating it here just to make sure that we're editing the right property and we didn't screw up somewhere. And so obviously, since we can see that it bends so crazily like this, we have the right things that are set. Okay. And we don't really have to worry about that anymore. So this is a good first step. And I think we're going to take a little break here and then continue in the next one.